What's going on, everyone? Today we are going to make one of my absolute favorite soups. In fact, one of my absolute favorite recipes. It's a really simple soup, just a couple of ingredients. Takes about 45-ish minutes to prepare. That includes the simmering time, so you don't even have to be watching it for that long. It's leek and potato soup. Served hot, leek and potato soup. Served cold, vichyssoise soup. I usually eat it hot, even in the summer, but if you prefer cold soups, it's fantastic cold as well. So let's roll an intro, and then we'll show you how to make this fantastic soup. All right, let's get started. We're going to start with the potatoes. I've got 2 potatoes here, but more accurately, I've got about a pound of potatoes. I find it's always better to do things by weight because the sizes of potatoes will change, whereas if you do it by weight, you'll know exactly how much you have. So 1 pound of potatoes. These are russet potatoes or baking potatoes. I find those work best in this recipe. We're just going to peel them real quick. If there's any sort of spots or any discoloration, just peel a little longer and get those off of there. And once you're done that, we're going to cut these down into small strips, into slices basically. Get rid of the potato peels though. In the garbage, we don't need those anymore. So as I was saying, into basically even size strips. I like making them a little smaller so they break down. This is a good opportunity to test some of your knife skills to try and get everything the same size, but it really doesn't matter so much with this soup because the potato is just going to break down and thicken our soup. Anyway, so the 2 potatoes, cut those down into those even size strips and set them aside, and those are basically ready to go. We're going to do the same thing now with our leeks, the second part of our leek and potato soup. So we'll get those out. And again, I've got 2 leeks here, but again, more importantly, about a pound of leeks. So equal parts potatoes and leeks. Once you've made this, you can mess around with those proportions and get the soup sort of however you want. There's 2 basic parts of a leek, I find. There's the white part that's on the left of the screen there, and then this sort of green leafy part, and the part that I cut off there was just basically not tender or anything like that, so it wasn't really useful. A lot of recipes will only use the white part. In this recipe, we're going to use the whole thing because it's going to simmer down, and then we're going to blend it up. To clean a leek, I should say, we need to split it in half first. There can be a lot of dirt and sand and those different types of things inside those little crevices of the leek, and you can only really get at it by cutting it in half. So run it on under cold water, sort of use your fingers to sort of move anything that's stuck in there off, and it's really that easy. And then once they're all cleaned, basically the same thing as the potato, slice it down, equal size slices as best as you can. A good opportunity to practice that skill. But that's really as easy as it is. And you're going to see I'm going to not cut everything exactly even, but if you make a mistake, no problem. Just cut them down as closely to even as you can, and then set them aside with your potatoes. Basically repeat the process with the rest of the remaining cleaned leeks, and you'll have something that looks like this. That's the end of our sort of prep. It's really that easy. I lost a bit of footage here, so unfortunately you're not going to see what I added, but basically add 2 quarts of chicken stock, or enough stock to cover the leeks and the potatoes, and then added about a tablespoon of salt, kosher salt in this case. Bring it up to a boil, and then reduce to a simmer. I've got mine on 2. You can sort of see a couple of little bubbles going through. After about 30 or 40 minutes, you'll have something that looks a little like this. Again, you can see just not boiling, but a little bit of bubble sort of simmering to the top. Once that's done, 30 or 40 minutes, like I said, we're going to get an immersion blender out. If you don't have an immersion blender or a stick blender, you can use just sort of the regular tabletop blender, or if you don't have one of those, you can just use the back of a fork and you'll get sort of a more rustic type soup. But I like using the immersion blender. It's really easy and it's good on a lot of different types of soups. I start on a low speed, and then once you're started, sort of crank up the speed to medium high or so on my blender, which is about 11 out of 15. After a minute or 2, or maybe 3 or 4, you'll have something that's really quite smooth and everything sort of blended together, and it starts to look a little bit like that leek and potato soup you might be used to. I'm going to clear off the counter and then bring back the pot of soup, which is basically mostly done at this point. The rest of these steps are optional. You can add them sort of as you want. I've got my serving bowl there. I like adding a little bit of parsley right to the soup and then adding some as a garnish afterwards. Gives it a nice sort of lighter, fresher type flavor. And then I add a bit of cream. In this case, I'm adding about 5 tablespoons of cream. The recipe says anywhere between 4 and 6, but again, it's completely optional if you don't like that creamy texture, or don't want those extra calories. Don't put it in, but it really gives it a nice sort of smoothish, creamy, velvety taste to your soup. And that's basically it. We've got a soup that's basically ready to go. Taste the soup before you serve it to any sort of guests at this point. You want to make sure you don't need to add any salt or pepper or anything like that. But that's really it. Last couple of steps, I like putting a little bit of sour cream or creme fraiche from a spoon and sort of lay it right on top of the soup. It'll sink in a little bit, but it'll give it, again, that mixture of hot and cold, and that sort of sour, creamy tanginess that goes with the soup. A little bit more parsley, or you could put a bit of chive on there, and that's basically it. You're gonna have a really fantastic appetizer. About 45 minutes, maybe an hour, depending on how quickly you are at slicing those vegetables. And a really, really great soup that's easy to make. So hope you enjoy it. Give it a comment down below if you're able to give it a try, and let me know how you like this recipe.